for joining our fourth and last session of the Scientific Writing Workshop from the Agronomy Graduate Student Association. We are glad to have with us today our guest speakers, Dr. Ignacio Ciampitti and Gloria Burgert. They will be sharing with us some experiences and talking about how to write high-impact grant proposals. So Ignacio is a professor of farming systems in the K-State Agronomy Department. He's the director of a new consortium for digital farming and development of decision support tools with a grant of about $3 million, which has industry partners like Microsoft, Corteva, among others, and is funded by the Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab and the United States Agency for International Development. In addition, Dr. Ciampitti is leading a large United Soybean Board-funded study focusing on the effect of best management practices on soybean seed quality with a grant of about more than 1.5 million, including several US universities. And Gloria is a grant specialist of K-State pre-award services. She has a bachelor's degree in agronomy from the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, a master's of science from Purdue in agricultural economics, and an MBA at K-State University. She handles proposals from the College of Business Administration, Industrial Extension, K-State Oleita, K-State Polytechnic, and other grants. So the idea of today's session is to have a short presentation of about 20 minutes, and later Ignacio and Gloria will be open for questions. And I think that with this, Ignacio, you want to go ahead and start?
Okay, thanks Mario for the introduction. Hopefully we will fulfill all these expectations from the students. So when we start thinking about how to put together a presentation, I mean, this is an entirely new presentation. It's nothing that we will have any other slides and we could use it. So but we start thinking about how to be more effective on some of the key findings or key things that maybe students should be thinking when writing grants. So I call this more the session more that is the grant writing 101. So, and usually are things that, for example, in other universities, there are courses on grant writing, formal courses, which I think that it would be nice to have these type of courses. And usually they are co-taught by many multiple faculties, not just by a professor. In this case, I'm myself alone, but usually they have 5 or 6 faculties that they tend to teach the course. And we will go through some of the main points about thinking when we are writing a grant. First, before we start, I will clarify that it's not really an easy formula for any grant writing. And all the different grants, depending on the sponsors, they basically have many multiple complexities. So, and then Gloria will discuss more towards the end on how to really be very thoroughly when you're reading all the specifications and guidelines from the sponsors. So just to start, I would say usually why we discuss about grant writing, and I will say that as everyone knows, the pressure that there is today in terms of, I mean, success in academia or even in industry or in foundations on delivering results is all based on also our ability or capability of writing good, successful grants. And for academia, I mean, this idea of, writing excellent grants or best possible is something that is important. In many situations, something to clarify, I mean, if we have developing a really good proposal, we'll have a high rate of funding, but we will go through some of these points that good proposals are not the ones that are the most technical or sophisticated or hard to understand, but sometimes are just the simple ones. Something just to start from the beginning, I mean, usually NSF, NIH, they release the rate of rejections that they have every year based on the total applications. in the last couple of years, that rate of the annual success rate on those applications, it was around 25 and 20%. So I say roughly around 25%, which means that from 70,000, I think that was the total number, 70,000 proposals, 25% of those proposals were accepted and funded. So that's something important to understand, that not all the times that we prepare grants and write the grants, we will get, a successful grant. So many situations is that rate, 25, 30% is a good indicator for many of us. And then I put this quote, and then you have the quote and the reference to the publication. Even very seasonal, people that have many years doing this exercise of grant writing, they tell me that usually only 30–40% of the times that they submit grants, they usually get funded. So again, this is to emphasize that the grant writing process is an evolution process. I would give an example that usually is in many situations not even the first try, but it takes probably second application resubmission or third application resubmission after the grant gets funded. So we're getting ready to start, okay? And we will keep it short. Before we start, I would say just a few tips. The first one is probably a no-brainer, but I will clarify. I always say start with small grants. Don't try to just never have expertise on writing a grant, and then you try to start writing a grant that is for $1 million. I would say the best exercise would be to write grants that they are for grad student grants or postdoctoral grants, that they are maybe 5, 10,000, 20,000, or even crop commission or commodity board grants that they are probably smaller in size. Start preparation early. So that's something that Gloria will discuss when you work also with the grant specialist. Be mindful about that. In many situations, even the grant specialists are working with 100 or 200 different grants. So you are just one of those 100 or 200. So start preparation early means that start reading the guidelines, think about the deadline, and make sure that you start working towards a plan to get you ready for that deadline. Gloria will discuss on this section, follow application guidelines. We need to pay attention to details. As I mentioned before, write very simple, be explicit and specific, but write simple, plain language. Don't use anything that is too complex. Another comment that we usually get on the grants is be realistic. If the grant is for 100,000 per year, you cannot develop goals or thinking that you are planning to solve the problem of nitrogen in the world. So be realistic and with the goals, and then this will be in parallel to the budget. Okay, we will not be talking today too much about the timeline of the budget, but achievable goals, they need to be reflected on that budget. So if we have a budget that is 100,000 and you are thinking about doing 300 studies around the world, most likely you are not planning well for that budget. And then most likely the reviewers' comments will say the proposal and the project looks awesome, but this will require 10 times the money that they're requesting. And in fact, if it just only for that reason, they can basically put as an excellent grant, but most likely not get funded because the goals were not achievable. And again, if you reject it, don't give up, okay? Never give up. Answer all the comments from the reviewers and try again. That's a process of grant writing. It's never that you will get the grant just on your first submission. In many situations, you get comments from the reviewers. You need to just be humble enough, look at the comments, and then try to reply to all the comments and prepare new resubmission on the next year and calendar cycle. Where to look for funds? Multiple places. I will just put a few: state levels, crop commodities, corn and soybean commissions, or any commission of crop commission. There is a lot of funding also from private industry partnerships. We have companies that they want to do basic science, seed companies, fertilizer, machinery industry. Regional and national scale, they are USDA is the the Department for Agriculture of the US, I mean, also the National Resources and Conservation Services, the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, the United Soybean Board, the Foundation for Agricultural Research. These are some of the few that basically the projects are usually more regional or national level, so not really so much at the state level. And if you are interested in international work, I mean, USAID is basically the branch of the US government funding international work. The World Bank, the UKID for UK work, and Fulbright program are basically some of the most interesting resources for international work. Same is on the foundations. I just put two examples, Gates, McKnight Foundation. There are many multiple examples depending on the country that you're targeting to work. And then you need to always be on the look because there might be more opportunities depending on the type of topics. Many times we are like this, I mean, when we're looking for funding. So no, there is no funding here either. But again, don't give up. Keep looking for RFPs. I mean, there are multiple opportunities. Before we start even thinking about writing the grant, how to become, an effective on writing the grants proposals. In many situations, it's good to serve as a reviewer, okay? And many times, many people will say, well, how do I do that? Okay, one of the best ways to do it is when you look at the topic that you're working and you look at the best resources of funding sponsors on that topic. If you are interested and if you have some level of expertise, if you have at least 1 or 2 publications on this topic, you can send an email. In many situations, even if you're a postdoc or even if you are in some situations a grad student at the end of the process, you can serve as a panel reviewer. I think that is one of the really most gratifying and enriching experience. You learn what are the basic limitations, weaknesses of the proposals, and you learn how to write successful proposals. And in many situations, it's not that hard to be part of a panel reviewer. Like a program leader from the USDA usually will have a list of potential reviewers. And then if you're interested, in many situations, you can even send an email to this person, to the program manager for that call or director, and offer your skills, just basically plainly saying that you have expertise, that you have 1 or 2 publications on this topic, and if you want to serve as a reviewer. And I will tell you that in many cases, they will accept that offer. And in fact, they need, in many of the panels, they need to have a diversified type of panels from people that have more experience and also young people serving on the panels just to have diversity. So I think that by sending an email, it doesn't basically damage any relationship that you might probably have with these program managers. This is a question all the time. I'm not sure if I should write a grant or being on a panel and reviewing 10. It's just a matter of balance. I will say that I usually write several grants per year, but I enjoy being at least on 5 or 6 panels in many situations, just because you get to learn about what is basically potential weaknesses or things that you might need to improve also on your side. And then also seeing what is the new technologies or new research that is coming from multiple topics. So again, it's not about doing all just panel and reviewing it, but just having some balance on that. One of the most important piece of the grant writing is the impact statement. So impact statement is what is the audience of the proposal. If it's NRCS, basically you know that you have a very heavy component on conservation. If it's also USDA, you know that you have a very heavy component most likely on extension and teaching and research. So think about all the different points on the proposal. Understand what is the sponsor applications. You can go back to the sponsor page and look at basically what was the last funded projects, okay? And you can look at those funded projects and saying, oh, my topic is probably closer or might be a continuation of this project. So by doing that step is basically important to make sure that your research is fitting very well with the topic that the sponsor is looking for. You don't want to put a topic that is not related or is not in the call for proposals because the sponsor will say this is not part of the topic of the scope. So do your research when you put a grant. I always say that the successful impact statement, it will consider the impact of life and people and environment. In many situations, even if you work on nitrogen and if you work on looking at optimizing your fertilization rate, it seems very narrow, the focus of the scope of your project, but still you need to try to do that exercise of extrapolating and saying, what will be the potential impact of the project? What will be the potential impact on the society and environment? And I always say this, I mean, although risky, because in many situations we go in this problem that if we extrapolate too much, and many reviewers will not like it, we still need to say, by the end of a project, what are the outputs and outcomes? Okay, by the end of a project, this team will be creating the largest database, and then next project will take care of, next steps on building basically the decision support tools for taking recommendations. But it needs to be very clear of what are you planning to achieve. And that statement of saying by the end of the project is important, because it's basically telling us what is the project planning to do. This is something that I brought again from the beginning. I say, write your proposal in a simple way possible. This comment came multiple times in many of our proposals. Use simple language. Many reviewers usually complain because when they're reviewers, you might think that basically it's a reviewer from your topic. Many situations, no. In many situations, the reviewers are from the branch of agriculture, but you need to assume that the reviewers are uninformed, that they don't know about your topic, but they are very quick to learn. They're quick to learn if you can express and communicate your ideas in a simple way, okay? This is one of the challenges that we have all the time with proposals. The idea might be really good, but the way that we sell the idea or show the concept is not easily to be understood, and then it's hard to be captured by the audience. And then that's why in many situations doesn't get funded. Clear objectives. The objectives needs to be very clearly highlighted. Don't be afraid of highlighting or bolding, unless in the RFP on the guidelines of the proposal preparation specify that you could not bold or use any other text format. If they don't say that, you can, which means that if you want to make sure that people see objectives, highlights, so do it, because that is important to basically emphasize what are the key components of your proposal, so the reviewer doesn't get lost in the narrative. Always say, write about something that you feel comfortable with. It might be maybe the first one that I need to say, but think very carefully about the topic and the flow of ideas and how you are planning to present your ideas. You cannot start writing a proposal if you don't know exactly what you're planning to, what is a part of the work or what is the goal that you're planning to achieve. So that's one of the main things that we are seeing in many situations. I mean, that it seems like basically that some of the proposals are not really solid from the foundation, from the beginning, that the idea is not clearly articulated. So think about when you're writing a proposal. I mean, think about the reviewers, okay? Many times, as I mentioned before, they are scientists or they are farmers. And then also, when we talk about the preparation, give yourself time to write, rewrite, and write again. We're doing the exercise of writing grants, and then you think that, okay, once I finish writing the final narrative, I'm done. And for having a very successful grant, in many situations, you will need to have several rounds of revisions. And in many situations, we have experts, all the people that they will look at the grant and they will read the narrative and they will provide comments. So that's why you need to give enough time. So, I mean, many people will just help you on that rewriting or writing, I mean, again. When you're thinking about team members, there is not really a magic formula or equation to say, okay, I will use myself and 3 more people. In many situations, think about the work that you're planning to do, think about diversifying, think about the critical areas of knowledge. I will say, consider applications in the grant. I mean, if it's research, teaching, extension, and then consider other points. In many other grants, we'll have basically industry component, or we'll have a technical advisory board, people that basically will provide guidance and provide feedback on the go, and then to make adjustments on year 1 or year 2, and also maybe farmer groups that they will provide feedback on that application. I usually say this, and I work a lot with my students on these conceptual frameworks. Usually they are very, very simple. They are trying to emphasize and visually to help you to convey the message very quickly. What are you planning to do on the grant? Because many situations we have reviewers that they will read the abstract and they will probably read this conceptual framework. And if the grant makes sense, they will probably go in detail. But if the abstract is not very well polished, if the conceptual framework is not clear, or you have too many arrows and this go here and then go back and then goes back, the reviewers, I mean, they get immediately lost and they say this grant is hopeless. And then you set the mode of and the mood of the reviewer, in fact, by just looking at the abstract and then by looking at this conceptual framework. And the last point, I mean, again, think about realistic goals, clear expectations, achievable outputs. Just to close on this section, I will say some of the things that you need to think about is state the problem early. I mean, don't think about that basically the reviewers already know what you're planning to work and how and why this topic is that important. Make sure that you just state very clearly using the science, citations, background, build a narrative so you can highlight what is a new topic, what is a new type of research that needs to be done that hasn't been done in the past. Outputs, outcomes, I mean, they are not the same, they're different, okay? But define them, define the key outputs, think about very clearly about the outcomes. In many situations, those outcomes are basically how what you're planning to do will make an impact. You will probably be developing a new decision tool, but the outcome is that the decision tool will basically be utilized by 5% of the people and impacting, basically increasing productivity by 1%. Okay, those numbers and the impact is more basically related to the outcome. And then think about the key indicators. There's things that we always, many grants, they start asking us, think about basically what could be the key indicators. If I'm working on wheat science, key indicators will be the times that the farmers will be applying herbicides. If I get to reduce that, and if I have 5% of the farmers are more efficient in applying herbicides, so that is a key indicator of basically success of my grant. And then, as I mentioned before, these are practice, I mean, that I haven't seen done in many situations, but I would recommend before any submission, not even your co-PIs, but it's okay to look for another person. And sometimes even if you can find someone that is completely unrelated to your topic, is still in agriculture, to review the proposal, because that person will just read the proposal for the first time and will give you some opinion or comments on something that hasn't been reported or reviewed by some other people, the co-PIs, that they already know your topic. And it's a very important component, more when you are thinking about going for the large and big grants. Of course, that's the last objective of the grant writing, no? Is show me the money. And that's what we are still all the time seeking. I mean, and then, as I mentioned before, never give up. Always think about this. It's a process that you are building the grants. You start with your first application, and you think about it as a process that if you get good on doing it, you might be able to get the first grant, the first, application. But in some cases, we are seeing that it takes maybe 2 or 3 tries. And it happened to us in many cases. One of the last NSF, it took us almost 3 years to get the grant. And we improved the project, working on the co-PI and trying to provide more support to the PI. And then the project, I think that got much better in quality. So at the end of the day, I think that that process was very useful. And we took all the real comments very, very carefully when we did the exercise. So with that, I will just pass it to the next section, that is the section that is basically the perspective from a grant specialist.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I will give the perspective of a grant specialist. What I find usually that it's very relevant for the PIs to find the right call of proposals. So on that, what was mentioned before is to really look for those opportunities that are listed. For you to read, once you find the sponsor that you feel that your research is aligned, to read that request for proposals or those guidelines in detail. And sometimes you will find that there's language that you don't understand, and that is the opportunity to reach out to your departmental support or the grant specialist so they can help you out with interpretation. This is a link to a popular opportunity that is in the USDA during the summers. And for example, the university places around 50 proposals for these calls. So it's something that it's very useful for you to read. And if you have questions, you can reach out to me or to anyone in your department to ask in advance, just for interpretation. Some of the things that we see in general is that the call has to be as aligned to the mission and the vision of the sponsor. And those are some of the things that are mentioned in the guidelines. They set links in the guidelines to the mission and the vision of the USDA, say. And is your research aligned to that? And how Dr. Ciampitti was explaining, how are you gonna align your outcomes onto those final expectations of the sponsor? Another thing is, are your research or expectations of what your project is intended to do aligned to that call? Is this one of the priorities that they're looking for? So this is something that also to think about while writing. And some things that you should have at hand once you see those guidelines and you start reading them is the institution that you're working for eligible? Am I a researcher that is eligible for this call? Because sometimes we have researchers that are not maybe PhD candidates or PhD researchers that are not yet able to be lead PIs. So maybe you can call up a faculty and ask them to be the lead PI while you are writing the proposal, and then you can be a co-PI in those cases. Or even ask for a permission to be the lead PI for that. And then can you meet the deadline? That's a big question usually. And some of these opportunities require a call and an intent, a letter of intent, or they call a white paper, or just a short idea, or just to let them know you're intending to apply to that opportunity. So once you find that opportunity, you say, I'm gonna place a proposal for this call. Reach your grant specialist. Let them know, share the guidelines so they can start reading them with you, and you can start asking questions and you can start planning. And usually, as it was mentioned, a grant specialist handle lots of proposals at the time. So to be first in line, it's good. So they usually, when a grant specialist works with a faculty that is organized and is working ahead, it's nice. So you can start playing the game of writing and having the support as you go along and not in the last minute. So usually what would happen is that the grant specialist would ask you, what does your project need? Do you have your staff working there? Do you have co-PIs? Are you working on a collaborative proposal? How many students? Those are some of the things that you might include in your budget, that the grant specialist will help you prepare that budget. Or you, once you get into the swing of it, you can just prepare your projects by yourself and your budgets by yourself. But in general, your support staff is here to help you with those things. Some of the things that are also detailed in the guidelines are if they're cost-shared funds, if the sponsor will give you money, if you place some effort towards it. So sometimes you need to find effort in funding from the university or the institution you're working with, or sometimes you're not. And the grant specialist will help you see that information within the guidelines and will bring it along to make that possible. And then some of the interpretation when reading those guidelines is most important to respect the maximum allowed of money. Usually if those limits are set for a reason. So we must make sure that you plan your project accordingly, and also in the period of performance. Usually if they're saying they're gonna fund 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year project, it's very important to follow through. And then again, make sure that you have that list of documents needed for the final end deadline. Usually faculty focus on the narrative because that's the most important document that goes with the proposal, but there's data management plans, there are summaries, abstracts, as it was mentioned, that need to be strong, but those are different kind of documents, and there are even more that some of them the grant specialist and your departments would work on, and others that it has to be joined. So making sure that you have that final list of documents and say, okay, how are we going to split up? What do I need to do? What do you need to do? And then go ahead and dive into your writing. Furthermore, when you read the RFP, make sure that you read all the way through, because sometimes when you get lost in that language of award information and review, some people tend to skip those sections. But it is important to go through all of it, because some details on how you're going to be evaluated are at the end, when one thinks that it's not relevant for the PI to read. So that final sections on award information, they usually mention, okay, we're going to fund proposals that are aligned to this or that priority, or we are looking for having meeting certain requirements on your proposal. And if those weren't included because you never went through the whole guideline, that's a mess. Finally, and this was also mentioned before, is are you going to meet that scientific review? And that scientific review, usually it is set mostly at the end of the guidelines. How are they going to scientifically evaluate your proposal? Which are the merits that they're going to look for? So those are things that are important to read, because they're there. If you're going to meet those reviews, that's excellent. Maybe you have better chances to be funded. And also, as it was mentioned, work ahead. Plan on submitting before the deadline. Some sponsors really appreciate having the proposals ahead. Even your department and your grant specialists like to have work ahead. If we have time, we can actually even offer a review on the writing, not scientific review, because we might not know all the ends and ends of the narrative, but making sure that all your figures are numbered, because usually in the change and in the edits and in the reviews, writers maybe eliminate an image and they just lose the numbering or the page tracks or certain things that are amiss, and then are lost in the last minute, are very hard to fix. But if you're working ahead, those are little details that lose points in the scientific review. Even when reading the guidelines, making sure that you follow the formatting on your narrative, on your extra documents, and also following those guidelines on this seems odd, but on the page number. If they are limiting your narrative to 10 pages, do not go over, because they won't read. They don't even read the extra pages. And once you have them all ready, send them to your grant specialist for further review. Most importantly, when you are in an institution like K-State, their internal paperwork and instructions, and this link below shows plenty of resources the university has for grant writing and support documents and examples on different parts of a proposal. So it's a good point of start for you. And as I mentioned to Ignacio also, to start small, to start with sponsors that might be more flexible in their deadlines maybe, or in their writing and in their, and then from there start building the relation into a bigger proposals. And then keep going. Once you have all your documents ready, we will be able to help you out. So I have nothing more to add, but let us know if you have questions.
I would say just to enter to a questions, this part of the questions is, if you never ask for money, they will never basically give you the money. So you need to be thinking all the time about that. Besides, the worst thing that could happen to you by asking money is that they will probably say no. This is usually how you feel when you finish a grant writing, because usually the writing process takes a lot of time and it's very intensive intellectually. And if you're writing a very large grant with many people asking, you need to start thinking about who to ask to be co-PIs, not only because of the skills, but also the commitment. If you start working with 10 other co-PIs and you see that they are not showing up to the meetings or planning meetings, or they cannot meet deadlines, you might need to start thinking about to collaborate with other people. And again, there's no harm on asking, no, when they want your work and lead on your research project. And as Gloria mentioned, be organized, plan ahead of time, prepare clear goals and outputs, and think about the timeline, no? If the grant is for a 3-year, so think about what are the things that you can get done in a 3-year project. So I will stop right there.
I think also I may add there that if you have lots of co-PIs, you will have to require personnel documents for everybody, and you won't have them all together. They won't be responsive, and then you have them assigned in a role that they won't be able to meet, and they will have you maybe not even be able to submit on time because you don't have their personal documents, like their resumes, there are many other conflict of interest documents and further notices that you might need. So also consider very well your partner when working.
Right. Thank you, Ignacio and Gloria. Great presentation. We really appreciate it. We know that it takes a lot of time to put all this together and take the time to be here 1 hour and a half. So we really appreciate it. And I don't know if someone from the audience has a question. Now is the time. Come on, guys, don't be shy. I have one. You are saying that usually we need to plan ahead. I mean, it's good to do everything before the deadline. So how early that will be? 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month? How that usually works? Because maybe you submit the proposal 2 months before and it's too early, you know?
No, that's too early. But for example, the university has a 1 week policy. You have at least your budget set and your budget justification. You don't need to have your full proposal ready, but you at least know your project. What are you planning to do? With a budget, you know how, if you're planning to use 1 student, 3, or a postdoc. And once that is set, you can leave it aside, leave it for authorization and certifications within your institution, and then concentrate on your narrative. And I see that policy is similar in other universities. So it's at least, that's the minimum, a 1 week.
Okay.
From the writing side, I will say that it depends really on what is the size of the grant. If you have a grant that basically you are trying to target that is $10 million, and then you know that you have 10, 15 people, you need to start probably at least many months earlier. I mean, if the application deadline is in September, October, I will start right now. Just organizing the team, making calls, making sure that everyone is on the same page, and then asking them to start basically delegating on what lead you are planning to give to each one of them is important. If this grant size is small, you can just do it in probably a month or less than that. But I will always say, I will make sure not basically underestimate the grants and the type of documents that you need, because if you have more external KPIs, then you will need basically more documents. And then they need to submit all the documents, and sometimes the documents are many: statement of work, budget justification, budget. So you need to basically help to make sure that they submit everything on time. If not, your grant is not accepted because it's not submitted on time.
Because it's not complete.
It's not complete.
If you don't have all the files that are needed, it's not complete. Even NSF for 10 million proposals with multiple institutions need a list of collaborators and their roles. So you have to make sure that you have that list of researchers and what they're gonna do and what is their role in a proposal. It's not just well, let's put something together out and take a chance.
Yeah.
Okay. I think there are a couple of questions. Thank you. In the chat. So Nathaniel Parker asked, is there any repercussion if you don't meet all the goals outcome stated in the proposal? I was also going to ask that. So
if there is any repercussion for?
If there is any repercussion if you don't meet all the goals or outcome that you were proposing?
Yeah, in many situations, most of the grants, they have like a year or depending on the grants, they usually have a year report. And then you need to report back to the sponsors on the progress. So in many situations, we didn't discuss on this presentation. It could be maybe for another seminar, but there is something that we call timeline, that you basically specify your objectives and then what is the time that you're planning to achieve those. So if your first objective was to do a literature review, you will say, okay, I will finish that project in the first year, okay? So by the first year report, you are expected to basically provide to the sponsor saying that you finish, or if it was a delay, why there was a delay. And specifically seeing if it was a delay, if it's not accepted by the sponsor, you can lose funding.
And actually today, like NSF has gone much more stringent in that. Late reports are also not having repercussion on the PI, but also for the whole institution. So once you write a proposal and it gets accepted and you get the award or grant, you have to be responsible for those reports, because they will have an impact on your name, and you may end up in a blacklist and they may not get funded again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and there are some flexibilities. I mean, with now, for example, with COVID, some of the sponsors are more flexible to give you some opportunities or to give you some what they call the non-cost extension, basically, which means that they might give you another extra year. They will maintain the funds that you have today, not give you more in many situations, but give you just an extra year to complete your project. But be very careful on what you propose, because as everything, you build a reputation. So if you try to say, I want to get the funds, and you overcommit or you basically overpromised, knowing already that will be hard to deliver, when you place the reports or when you look at the outcomes or the outputs on the project, the outputs that you are delivering, they immediately will start seeing the situation that basically you are not achieving those targets. And most likely not only impact the funding that you have currently with that sponsor, but it will impact the possibility that you will get for getting funding from that sponsor and potentially from some other sponsors. So there is always a repercussion by not meeting the goals of the outcome of the proposal.
Okay. Okay, I think that there is another one that is on the chat. How detailed should be the first concept just to discuss roles with KPIs and initiate discussion?
I will say that it depends on the size too. You know, if you are only looking, if you are thinking and approaching people that you already have been working with them in the past, it's quite simple, because if you know that those researchers, you can almost send an email and then basically saying, I'm planning to submit this application, maybe it's in 2 months or 3 months. And I would like for you to take the lead on the biochemistry side, and then for you to take the lead on the statistics side, just to have an expert in statistics. And then from there, if they agree, most likely then you will have a meeting and then you start building the concept. And the idea is that it's good to have clear objectives and clear roles, because you start including people. Sometimes they have proposals that they have, for example, 25 people, and then you know that 5 people, you know exactly what 5 people is planning to do, but you don't have any clue what the other 20 are doing. So be careful on that. And then it's easier when you have like specifically a person leading an objective, or each of the objectives. I mean, if I have 5 objectives, I have 1 person leading each objective, and then those people, they might have some other person on their team, but I know who is the objective lead, and then inside of each one of them, I know exactly who are the people working with them. If I have a large grant, I would probably put together like a 2-page or concept note. I usually try to do that with many of my students, and to train them on this, is you have a 2-page that you explain your concept more when you are bringing new people that you are never have been working in the past before, to explain the concept and to propose of what are you have in mind in terms of them to collaborate. But I try to keep it simple, because I want it for them, they don't have time or they have minimum time. I want it for them to get a quick flavor of what we would like to do and what will be their role. And then from there, if they accept that basically first email, then we'll set a meeting for, I mean, just to basically brainstorm the ideas and to say, okay, you will be taking that lead, and then you will be able to flash all the details, on that section. So that's one of the things. And then sometimes one of the things that Gloria can also comment on this, on the guidelines, we also have something that is called indirect cost. Okay, indirect cost is a cost that is not part of the grant, and it's a cost that it goes straight to the university
or the institution that you're working for.
So what I'm saying is that sometimes, I mean, we have opportunities that they might be $1 million, but then when you look at the indirect cost is 50% or 54%, which means that the sponsor is allowing that 54% of that request goes straight to the university. And then the money that gets to the PI to do the research is basically 46% or 50%, let's put the hypothetical case. And then if you have 4 or 5 PIs, and in 4 years, the money really that gets to that researcher, it's only just maybe 50,000. And sometimes, I mean, in a smaller grant, it could be the opposite. You might have a grant that is 100,000, but then the indirect cost allowed by the sponsor is only 10%. And if the sponsor was saying it's 10%, they will not be able to remove more than 10%. That means that from that 100,000, $10,000 goes to the university, $90,000 goes to the basically entire project. Okay, so that information is on the guidelines, and it's important because when you start looking at the size of the grants, be careful. Sometimes, I mean, large size of grant doesn't tell you that, oh, this will imply a lot of funds for the researcher. It's more about basically indirect costs. I mean, how many PIs you have involved, okay? And I think that those are the main issues that you need to consider also on looking at the size of grants and also looking at these indirect costs.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a big thing, right? To check on those guidelines. So I think that I will read the one first of Logan, and later I will move to Nathaniel.
Mhm.
So Logan is asking, how do you write a good section on societal impacts? It seems like it will be hard to write this well, either too much or not enough.
I will say that, yeah, I will not get too much entangled on this. I mean, it's important to have a vision. It's important to say exactly, if I'm working on a project that we are developing some predictions that will help farmers to take decisions, it's important to emphasize the point that if I build these predictions and farmers can take much informed decisions, I will reduce the risk that the farmers are using, and then most likely the farmers will have chances for reducing the environmental footprint, increasing profitability. And that's exactly my connection. I'm not saying that I'm planning to make a positive impact on or increasing profits, but my output is a tool. My outcome is that if the tool is well used, then they can take more informed decisions, and those informed decisions basically will help to reduce environmental footprint and improve use efficiency and increase productivity and most likely profitability. And then those are the main impacts that you have on the farming side. Then you know that in some of these that we discussed there, I mean, on this example, the impacts on society by reducing environmental footprint, on using fertilizer, or by increasing efficiency. So be careful of making sure that the impact statement is there and the society impact is there, but don't try to go full overblown, because you need to also emphasize very clearly, the reviewers need to realize that what your project is planning to do, and then what is the potential outcome of the project in, like, what will happen in 10 years. Okay, 5 or 10 years after the project is ended, what will be the impact of that project? And then usually most of the reviewers, they use that society impact on that thinking. I mean, after the project is completed, what will be the impact of this project 5 to 10 years down the road?
Okay, it's like kind of long-term and short-term objectives, right?
Yes, the short term is, I mean, when you think about this, it's like, this is what is my output for the proposal, and this is the outcome that the proposal will have immediately during the duration of the proposal. So if it was a 3-year, you know that probably you're proposing that maybe 5% of the farmers will learn how to use the tool and will be basically start using that tool and start seeing benefits. But you are expecting that the long-term life of those outcomes is that in 5, 10 years, those outputs will be helping farmers, because, I mean, we'll have probably 25% or 30% of those farmers already using the tool, and then reducing the environmental footprint and increasing profitability. So, but again, make sure, I mean, I think that there is a limit between there of not going, full blown on saying, I mean, I will just solve all the problems of the world, and making sure that we clearly connect what are you planning to do on your research and what will be the potential implications once that research is ended.
Okay.
In many situations, it's also called this the sustainability of the program. No, what is the autonomy? Because if your project is ending, will that mean basically that the benefits for farmers will end forever? Mm-hmm. Or basically you started something that basically will continue over time.
All right. Okay. So Nathaniel before asked, do grant agencies check for plagiarism in proposals?
Actually, all researchers at the university have to complete a responsible conduct research training, and that includes plagiarism. Once the proposal is submitted by the university on behalf of the PI, we are saying that we are conducting this training and that we are doing responsible research. Just like the thesis, that there are electronic softwares to check on plagiarism. You have to give your list of references and your narrative, and off it goes. So I'm very sure that that is checked, but it's also your honor on saying that those are your words.
So Mario, I have a quick question. So
Yes,
how
go
important
ahead.
is for students to submit proposals while in grad school? How that might help in the future?
Carlos, can you repeat the question?
No,
If the students can submit proposal, is that the
Yeah,
question?
no, it was how important is for a student to submit a proposal while in grad school, and how that may affect the future career as a faculty in a university.
well, if you want to be a faculty, it's a great opportunity to practice and have your experience on writing and preparing and doing the whole ado of preparing a proposal. And if you cannot still be the lead PI, the faculty, your lead professor can be the PI, and you can be the co-PI and still be the 100% executor of that project.
I think that there are multiple opportunities. I mean, I did it more when I was a postdoc, on the transition, even a PhD, a postdoc. And in many situations works really well because, I mean, when you're applying for, if you are staying on, and also even if you go to industry, I think, but if you're staying more in academia, I would say that having that expertise, or at least even if you have at least a few proposals that you have, or taking the lead, or being a co-PI, or any participation is excellent, because they will know that you know the system, and they will know that you probably have some discussions about these things. I mean, basically, you will know that not all the proposals that we will submit get funded. You will know that you need to keep trying. You will know that usually it takes probably like 10 proposals so you can get probably 1 or 2 funded. And then you will know that you have some of that persistency, because at the end of the day, what it takes also, I mean, even to work in academia quite a bit, is persistence. It's not just about having the great science, because you might have the idea and your idea could be the best, but if you don't have the key contacts or the key co-PIs or the right way to showcase your idea, you might not get funded. And just because maybe your reviewers don't understand completely. So my personal experience when I apply to many university positions, including K-State, was that by them seeing that you have some, even if it's very small number, some level of expertise on writing proposals, and you understand a little bit what it takes really to write proposals, it really helps you. And then the search committee, when they see that, they know that they're investing in the future of that professional, because they know that you don't have a track record of bringing millions of dollars. But as long as you understand the system, and as long as you see all the complexity, and they see that you have some experience, I think that will play very positive on your side.
And just to follow up, do the students have the same support from peer award systems that the faculty has?
Yeah, they do. I'm sure that there are certain, your PI will help you with certain internal paperwork, but yes, definitely. Actually, the College of Agriculture has a whole team of grant specialists helping the faculty. And after those grant specialists prepare and help prepare those proposals, they go to pre-awards for another review, and then they get submitted, because there's a high volume. So it's actually very good for all the ag department to make sure that they go through several reviews and you get plenty of support.
But the most important point is also to plan in advance. At least from my experience, for example, I usually writing at least 1 or 2 proposals per month, and then collaborating on many others. But I usually communicate with the pre-awards specialist and my college grant specialist at least a month ahead, and I'm telling her I'm planning to submit. In this case, I'm saying her because it's another person. I'm planning to submit a proposal, and it will be due on May 24th. And I already told this person today that I'm planning to submit a proposal, and we will have probably 2 or 3 co-PIs and maybe 13 people from collaborators from the entire US.
Because then behind the scenes, all the grant specialists from the different universities get in touch and say, okay, I need from you these documents. I need from you these documents. So 2 different parallel communications happen simultaneously. So we all teams go advancing simultaneously towards the deadline to meet all the requirements, because there's plenty of things to do. Yes.
And usually it happens that, I mean, me as a PI, I want to focus on the narrative specifically. I want to make sure to focus very well on the narrative to make the best work on making sure that my message, my goals are clear. And then it's good to have the support of a grant specialist that they look at probably 10 other documents: budget justification, management plan, resumes,
collaborators, facilities, equipment.
So everything that you need to submit on a standard application that you need to request, you need to get. If I have 10 other co-PIs, I rather basically put my grant specialist in contact with the grant specialist from Iowa and from South Dakota and I'm telling them what we need from the grant is all these documents. And then many times I'm not seeing that communication unless the grant specialist is telling me I haven't got any response from Indiana. Could you help me on that? And I'm like, done. And then I just distracted maybe for 1 second and start requesting an email. We need to put the paperwork. If you cannot send me the paperwork,
you're out.
And then this is also a good dynamics, because then you start seeing what are the people that you want to collaborate. And then imagine that if they don't dedicate time when you are putting together the grant, once it's funded, you probably will never see them again. So this idea of looking for key people that they provide time and ideas and dedication is very important.
The experience tells you that the biggest universities are the most heavy in paperwork. So it could be Cornell or MIT, and they might need 2 weeks to be able to give you all those documents. But maybe a smaller university has the ability to work it around and provide those documents. So don't be surprised on your partners.
I usually request, that's why I did it at least a month ahead. I put everyone in contact with the grant specialist, and I say the deadline for my grant specialist to send all the documents is usually a week before.
A week before the week before the 2 weeks before.
2 weeks before the deadline. And then I'm telling them so they can then send that message to the grant specialist to make sure that they know this, that if they don't send the documents, if they don't go behind and they do the job of doing this, I'm not planning to include them. Because it's part of being collaborating and making sure that we get a successful grant. We have been situations that we almost could not submit the grant because of the delayed documents, and you don't want for that to happen. You are working on your narrative, and it's just a document.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Please go ahead.
No, make sure to ask questions to your grant specialist when writing. If you don't find a piece of information, which font do I need to use? It seems silly. Which size of font? Because that determines the number of pages that you have to write. So certain guidelines show you exactly the titles they want to see in that project narrative, the sections that must be there. So if you don't see that, you don't feel afraid to ask, because the grant specialists have seen these guidelines many times. So they can point you directly on here and there, or provide extra links. Sometimes guidelines have other packet of guidelines on the specificity for those files that need to be submitted, and the headers and the page numbers and things and details that maybe once the PDF is created, it's harder for a grant specialist to edit. So always work ahead with Word documents that have the ability to number your figures automatically to create. So then you can create your table of references by default. Those are things that seem laborious at the beginning, but by the end, when you're running into the last minute, just deleting an image, a figure, and updating that table of content is immediate. And you can still see that there are faculty that are struggling with those things. And maybe it's just having a quick Word course. And I'm sure that all the grad students know already how to create a table of content, but sometimes you find faculty that they don't. So working with all those tools that are in your word processors are important to have at hand. So don't be afraid to ask.
Okay, thanks. So is 510, are you okay with the last question, or?
Yeah, I'm seeing two questions. I can answer one quickly on the issue of plagiarism. I will say that if you submit a grant, I will give an example, to USDA, to one call, right? And it was not funded because the reviewers make comments that there were things that they need to improve, and there was probably not a good fit for that grant or that type of. If you didn't get funded, you can just take it out. I mean, as you got rejected, no, for that call, and just work. And then if you want, submit the same one to another call, as long as it's not basically being in consideration in two. That's the only thing. It's similar to
some opportunities allow that.
Some opportunities,
some
not
sponsors,
many.
But not many.
Not many.
And you have to report all your proposals that are pending and awarded. So nothing will be hidden that you're double dipping. So you have to make sure that it's not plagiarism, but you're not asking twice for the money.
Yeah. So, and then the last question, I mean, from Adriane, I mean, I will answer, but I don't know, maybe Gloria will have a different answer. I think that for her, it's all the year.
It's year round, yes. But there are certain calls, like the link that it was included in the presentation, the USDA, that goes in the summer, and that is very, very busy. So usually, like NSF started opening their deadlines and just leaving them open for all year round submissions, and they just make calls on when they're going to evaluate them instead of setting a deadline. But in general, their deadlines they need to be respected, but usually it's busy the whole year round.
Yeah. I would say that from my side, it's almost the same. Like we have calls for proposals, I mean, from multiple, as I mentioned. I mean, if you think about USDA or FFR or NSF, it goes all the way from January to probably until July. And then we have calls from USDA or foundational, I mean, in August, and then you have calls in July, I mean, September, October for crop commodities, DOE, the Department of Energy. So it's like every month you always have some calls, I mean, of proposals. And then one of the things that you need to also decide is
it worth your time, your effort? Is it aligned to your research?
Aligns to your research and to your point of expertise, worthy of your time or not? Do you need more extra work?
Can you do it?
Can you do it? So you need to put all those into the equation and balancing that situation too. At some point, you will decide it's okay to say no when you feel uncomfortable. It's okay, for example, when someone is approaching you and asking you to do something that, oh, I want for you to be the expert in plant pathology. And I'm like, I'm not. I don't have any clue. And it's okay to say no, because even if the grant was already funded and they're saying, well, I want to give you the money, I think that it's okay to say no. I mean, I'm not the expert. Let me bring someone that will help you to do the job and put the grant in a much better path of success that I will be able to do it. And I think that that's some of the things that you need to also start learning about, how to wait on to how much time do we need to invest. And that's why I also discussed at the beginning of start with small grants, because usually when you start working on a big grants or large grants, it takes way too much time. And you might spend a month or 2 months of your time really heavily on building a grant, when you probably need to start working on building networks and building collaborations and making sure that you are learning about on a reviewer panel or being a co-PI first, and trying to learn about basically how the kinks and the in and outs on all the grants. And then you start shooting for those big grants. And again, even for example, to give an example on the USB or the soybean board proposal, we put that proposal at least, 2 times, until we got the second time basically funded. But it took us 2 years. We have that NSF call took us 3 years. So usually I think that it's a process of evolution. And that's why we are saying that the theme is also about persistency.
Okay, thanks. So it's 5:15. I think that we can close with this. And again, we really appreciate you sharing your experience and ideas, and maybe some student didn't have ever the opportunity to hear too much about that. As you say, maybe we skip courses and we never heard about this. So this is great. We really appreciate it.
And there are many opportunities for students, as Carlos mentioned. I know that we were helping him and he applied for the SARE proposal. There are some opportunities for graduate students that they are small, but there are still excellent opportunities for basically start training. Even university has a global food systems. Some of these grants are small. They are, but they are excellent opportunities for a student saying, I have an idea, and then if this idea is good and basically I can demonstrate, I will be able to go and request for funding in a much larger scale. So there are opportunities for graduate students that they have the idea and they want to put together something, to give it a try, to say, I will look for these goals and I will do the exercise of at least applying. And I think that is the only way that you start learning how to do it, is just by doing it.
Yeah, certainly.
And yeah, just about the experience I had, the SARE grant, for example, it's small in terms of money, but it's complex as the NRCS or other USDA one. So it's a great training if you guys want to really try, or at least learn how to write. I learned about outputs, outcomes, evaluation plan, all that stuff, and that's a great experience for graduate students.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you again, our speakers, for your time and experience sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye. See you.